The first cut, Flight 180. The story kicks off in the year 2000. A bunch of high school kids are getting on Volé Airlines Flight 180 for a class trip to Paris. But for one of them, Alex Browning, something feels deeply wrong. He gets hit with this sudden, violent, and super specific vision. The plane is going to explode right after takeoff. He understandably freaks out, which gets him, a handful of classmates, and a teacher kicked off the plane. Standing on the tarmac, they watch in absolute horror as his premonition comes true. The Boeing 747 blows up in a massive fireball, killing everyone they left behind. Now, the official story was a bunch of mechanical failures, a bad wire, a spark, a fuel line. You know the drill. But the real reason is much simpler. It was just their time to go. By getting off that plane, Alex and the others didn't save themselves. They just messed up the schedule. They broke Death's design. This first film sets up the most important rule of the entire franchise. Death has a list, and it does not like being cheated. It starts hunting the survivors one by one, in the exact same order they would have died on the plane. Every death that follows is like a horrifying Rube Goldberg machine, where everyday things, a puddle of water, a falling knife block, become instruments of pure doom. Alex tries to fight back, using his memory of the vision to predict what's coming, but he learns a hard lesson. You can't stop death. You can only, maybe, delay it for a little while. The ripple effect, Route 23 pileup. 1 year after the Flight 180 disaster, a new hero, Kimberly Corman, is heading out for spring break with her friends. While she's on the on-ramp for Route 23, she has a terrifying vision of a massive multi-car pileup, all started by a logging truck spilling its cargo. The vision is so intense that she stalls her car on the ramp, blocking a state trooper and a few other drivers from getting onto the highway. Seconds later, it all happens exactly like she saw. Final Destination 2 is where things get really interesting. It doesn't just copy the first film, it expands the world. We find out that the survivors of the Route 23 crash aren't random at all. Each of them had their lives indirectly saved by the actions of the Flight 180 survivors from the first movie. They were all living on borrowed time, creating what the creepy mortician William Bloodworth calls ripples. And because these survivors were never supposed to be on Death's list to begin with, the rules change. This time, Death comes for them in the reverse order of how they would have died. The movie also gives us our first potential loophole, the idea that only new life can defeat death. The survivors think a baby's birth might save them, which turns out to be wrong. But it leads Kimberly to a wild solution. She drowns herself, only to be resuscitated at the last second. By technically dying and coming back, she becomes new life, hitting pause on Death's plan for her and the last remaining survivor. The Omen in the Lens, Devil's Flight roller coaster. 5 years later, we're at an amusement park with Wendy Christensen, who's about to get on the Devil's Flight roller coaster. Right before the ride launches, she has a premonition of a horrific derailment. She panics, a fight breaks out, and a small group of students get off the ride. From the ground, they watch the coaster fly off the tracks, killing everyone still on it. This movie adds a twisted new element to Death's game, Omens. Before the disaster, Wendy took a bunch of photos of her friends at the park. After the first few survivors meet their grisly ends, she realizes the pictures hold clues that foreshadow how each person is going to die. The photos are like Death's sick little Easter eggs, a way to mess with its victims before it strikes. It becomes a psychological game. The survivors can see what's coming, but that knowledge just makes them more paranoid, seeing danger in every shadow and every loose screw. The main rule stays the same. They die in the order they were meant to on the coaster. But now, Death isn't just an invisible force. It's a cruel artist, taunting them with a snapshot of their own doom. The 3D Carnage, McKinley Speedway. Jump to 2009, and we're at the McKinley Speedway, where Nick O'Bannon is supposed to be having a fun day at the races. Instead, he's hit with a vision of a horrifying crash where a car flies into the stands, causing the whole stadium to collapse. Nick manages to get his friends and a few other people out just in the nick of time. The Final Destination is probably the most straightforward movie in the series. It doesn't add a ton of new rules, focusing instead on pure, visceral carnage that was originally shown in 3D. The one small twist is that Nick starts having premonitions within his premonitions, seeing cryptic clues about what's coming next that he has to try and figure out. But the logic is the same. Death's design is back in full force, picking off the survivors in the order they should have died at the speedway. This film is really just a brutal reminder of the franchise's main point. You can run, but you can't hide. In a pretty bleak ending, instead of leaving any loose ends, Nick has one final vision of all three main survivors being taken out by a runaway truck, and the film ends as it comes true. The perfect circle, North Bay Bridge collapse. And that brings us to the North Bay Bridge, and the movie that brilliantly flips the entire franchise on its head. Sam Lawton is on a bus for a corporate retreat when he has a vision of the suspension bridge completely tearing apart. He wakes up just in time to get his ex-girlfriend, Molly, and a few co-workers off the bus and off the bridge. Moments later, they watch it collapse for real. Final Destination 5 gives us the darkest rule yet. The mortician, Bloodworth, shows up again with a new piece of advice. If you want to live, you have to take a life. By killing someone who wasn't supposed to die on the bridge, you can take their remaining lifespan and get your name off the list. This completely changes the game, turning the survivors against each other. It's no longer a fight for survival. It's a grim moral choice. But the real genius of this movie is the jaw-dropping twist at the very end. After everything they've been through, the last two survivors, Sam and Molly, get on a flight to Paris. As they're settling in, they see a commotion. A group of high school kids is getting kicked off the plane. Then we see the logo on the side of the jet, Voli Airlines. The flight number? 180. Final Destination 5 was a prequel the whole time. The bridge collapse happened in April 2000, right before the first movie. The timeline is a perfect, inescapable loop. The story doesn't start with Flight 180, it ends there. The Skyview Tower, Premonition, Bloodlines. The nightmare begins back in 1968, on the glittering opening night of the Skyview, a lavish new restaurant perched at the very top of a state-of-the-art skyscraper. Among the elegant guests are Iris Campbell and her boyfriend Paul, ready to enjoy a night of fine dining and panoramic views. But celebration quickly turns sinister. A mischievous child ignores a guard's warning and flicks a coin over the edge, unknowingly setting off a deadly chain of events. Hairline cracks creep across the glass floor. Gas hisses from ruptured pipes. Within moments, the glamorous evening dissolves into pure chaos. Diners plummet hundreds of feet as the floor gives way. The head chef accidentally ignites a blaze, and a screaming woman, completely engulfed in flames, stumbles into a room thick with leaking gas. The inevitable explosion shakes the entire tower. Panic drives survivors toward the elevators despite desperate warnings. One man tries to force his way in, gets trapped in the doorway, and plunges with the collapsing lift. The entire structure tilts and splits apart like a breaking spine. Iris fights to help others, but can only watch in horror as guests are crushed against the shattering glass. Even the reckless child who started it all doesn't escape death's plan. Then, silence. Iris jolts awake, back at her dinner table, moments before disaster. Armed with the vision, she scrambles to evacuate the room, saving dozens of lives and defying fate for now, but death is patient. Decades later, in 2025, Iris's granddaughter Stephanie Reyes begins to experience vivid dreams of the same terrifying night. The details are too precise to dismiss. History is ready to repeat itself, and death's unfinished business is finally coming due.